Hello? 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 Mm-mm. To doing this work. And so with that in mind, I'm gonna get started on this workshop. So give you some background information about SHARP. SHARP started 5 years ago to provide diversity, inclusion, training for educational institutions. I am a member of the SHARP team. My name is Sharisha Barrett. I have an experience in working in higher education and also K through 12. I was interested in going this direction in my careers because I wanted to be in a position where I was able to make a macro impact. So today's agenda, we're going to talk about three things. First, we're going to focus on the history of this country. We're going to talk about power, privilege, and oppression, and strategies on how you can become an ally. So what I would like for you to do first, I want you to introduce yourselves. I want you to state your name, your position, your city, state, or country, because we have some people from other countries on this phone call, and why you want to participate in this workshop. God is good. Wow, I see some people are from Spain on this phone call. Wow. Wow.
I can go first.
So we like to keep this conversation going. We just don't want this conversation just to be occurred on one day. So you can share your thoughts on our Twitter handle at Sharp Education and use the hashtag #AllyReady. So why are we here? We know why we're here. We know that the George Floyd issue is the reason why we're here. I don't know why this was a turning point, but this tells us the reason why we're here, because we see that there's something different has to change. So let's go back in time. Let's talk about Christopher Columbus. As we know, during the 1500s, we know that people from Europe were in search for new land, new territory. In addition to new territory, they were in search for opportunities for them to be able to look for other ways to get to India, and they were looking for spices and gold. So once they start doing this exploration, what we notice is that there were people already here. So the debate is always this. Did Christopher Columbus was he the one who actually discovered America? No, he wasn't the person that discovered America. Instead, there were Native Americans already here. And since Native Americans were already here, we know that there were 5 to 15 million Native Americans already here. And so when we think about that, we know how this sets the tone of how our country or our countries were first established. When we think about the slave trade, only 10% of the slaves were brought to the United States. The other 90% were brought to Latin America. So the first thing that we have to discuss the concept of race. What is race? Race is a social construct. It is something that doesn't exist. We are 99.9% share the same DNA. And it was a system that was put in place in order for certain individuals to obtain power. So, where does this idea of white comes from? It comes from the Bacon's Rebellion. And so it was a dispute between Nathaniel Bacon and William Berkeley, who was the governor of Jamestown. And so Bacon wanted to move westward, while Berkeley said, no, I don't think that's a good idea. We shouldn't conflict with the Native Americans. And so Bacon decided to establish his own militia composed of white indentured servants and Black slaves. And he told them, if you vote, if you work with us, if you work with me, you will gain your freedom. And so there was constant conflict between Berkeley and Bacon. But during that time, indentured servants and slaves were living together in harmony, meaning that they both were working together. So the indentured servants, they had to spend 7 years of servitude, while the slaves were there. They were there, but that was not a time where they were both equal during that time. And so in order for the white planters to decide how they were going to maintain order, they decided to come up with a system. So what they said, no, we cannot have this multiracial alliances. Instead, we have to come up with something different. And so what they decided to do is give the white indentured servants, give them freedom. They were able to join the militia. They were able to have certain rights. They were able to own guns. Why they said the individuals, the Negroes during that time is what they called them. They said they were going to be slaves for the rest of their lives. So when this country was originally designed, it was designed from people from northern Eastern Europe. When we think about this, there has been systems where we know that this concept of white is constantly changing. And so because it's constantly changing, we know that initially this country was founded by white Protestant men. So if you were Catholic, they didn't want you here. If you were Irish, they didn't want you here. During that time, during the mid 1800s, they came up with a system where it was going to take you 21 years in order for you to become a citizen. In 1912 is when they decided people from Southeastern Europe to become citizens of the United States. So there's a similar system that also was occurring during that time in Latin America. So if you were born in Spain, you were on the top of the hierarchy. If you were African, you were on the bottom. And if you look at various charts, sometimes they have the Native Americans on the bottom and they have the slaves on top. Because during that time, Native Americans were not surviving because they were dying off because of course, ongoing warfare with the colonists, but also they were dying off because because they were dying from European diseases. So why is this a constant problem? It's a constant problem because we know that this country is changing, meaning that this country is changing where this race and ethnicity, we're seeing that the white population is decreasing and the Hispanics are increasing. And you know, as you can look at this chart, there is a group of individuals that are missing, and we're going to talk about those individuals in a little bit. So look, when we think about hate crimes that occur in this country, it is mostly have to do with race, ethnicity, and ancestry. You can see 60% of hate crimes are because of these issues. So as I talked about before, we know that the concept of white is constantly changing. And what do you think is going to happen to the Latinx community? The Latinx, typically, if you think of, if someone is Latinx, it is not a race, it is more so an ethnicity. And so since it is an ethnicity, what's going to eventually happening are those people who identify themselves as white Hispanics are going to eventually get their white cards. So what is racism? A lot of times people get confused between racism and prejudice. So racism has to do with power. Racism equals race prejudice plus structural system. So when we think about individual racism, these are your private thoughts. These are thoughts that you don't share with anyone. That when we think about biases, prejudices, stereotypes, those are your personal thoughts. Stereotypes. When you process information, that's called your schema. You process information automatically 95 to 98% of the time. So when you say, okay, when you look at it, a chair, you'll say that's a chair, that's a car, that is a house, that is a Black person. You automatically put those things and those individuals into categories. And so because you do that, they become stereotypes. And we see these stereotypes every day. Now, there's a big conversation that's been in the news about Aunt Jemima. What's going to happen to Aunt Jemima? They're in the process of addressing that. And we notice how, you know, many of these baseball teams and football teams are named after Native Americans and how offensive those stereotypes are to them. And then we have Mickey Rooney dressed up as an Asian individual. And we know how these stereotypes play a major part on how we interact with people. So when we think about it, implicit bias plays a major part in how you interact with people that are different than you. So normally when if you see Blacks, Black people are normally labeled as thugs, animals, destroying their community. Whites are labeled as rowdy, mischievous, booze-filled individuals. So you see how these language and these labels play a major part on how we interact with people. So one thing, and I love Malcolm X because he was a powerful speaker. He said the media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power, because they control the minds of the masses. So when we talk about interpersonal racism, we're discussing how you interact with people that are different than you. And then when we think about that, it goes back into talking about discrimination. Discrimination has to do with behaviors and actions towards certain individuals because of their differences. So you may be treated unfairly because you're disabled. You might be treated unfairly because you come from another country, or you're Muslim, or you're a female, or you're an older adult, or you're a different social class, or you are a young adult, or because you are Jewish. So when you hear the word institutional racism, we're talking about policies and practices. Think about the government. Think about the government, think about the educational system, think about the legal system. That's what you need to keep in mind when you're talking about institutional racism. Institutional racism tends to favor the individuals, the dominant culture versus the marginalized cultures. So it promotes exclusion. Some of the policies and practices are unintentional, some of them not intentional. And we even think about the criminal justice system, how it was designed. Structural racism. Think about history. Think about this concept of whiteness and people of color. It is pretty much embedded in the history of our country. So when we think about lack of accessibility, who's in power when we think about politics? If we look in the United States, older white men are the ones who are in power. And this also, you think about how certain policies and laws have put in place in order to prevent people of color from getting the same opportunities from the dominant culture. So the last type of racism is cultural racism. And so when we talk about cultural racism, we got to think about this, who sets the norms in our society? Who sets the norms in our society? So when we think about that, we're talking about in the 1800s, the United States acquired the Philippines. And it says it is our responsibility to civilize these individuals. And so when we know that, that has been, sets the tone on how our society is the way that it is. So for example, Gene Wilder, he was born Jerome Silberman, and how some actors and actresses had to change their Jewish last names or their Hispanic last names in order for them to be granted certain opportunities. Native Americans, when they had them go to these schools, and they told them, they said, your culture is not, it's not Eurocentric. We have to make your culture more like ours. And who established the tone on beauty? So we think of Christine Brinkley. When we think about beauty, blonde hair and blue eyes defines beauty in this country. And as now, we have to in other parts, in some states, they have to write legislation to ensure that people of color are able to bring their authentic selves to the table. So one thing about this country, they use religion to justify what they do, why they do what they do. And so when we think about that, the manifest destiny, they said it was God's. God told them that they needed to be able to stretch from one ocean to the next. And that's why they justify what they did. Mexicans are like, we were here first. We didn't land on you, you landed on us. And that is many Mexicans' philosophy about, the colonists expanding the territories. Native Americans, Native Americans, when we talk about Native Americans, they were the first Americans. And since they were the first Americans, we know that they are actually one of the groups have been treated more unfairly than Blacks. So you had Andrew Jackson, who wrote the Indian Removal Act of 1830, displaced the Native Americans from Florida. What happened was, during that time, Native Americans had to be placed on reservations, and many thousands and thousands of Native Americans lost their lives during the Trail of Tears. So when we think about this, we see how this westward expansion didn't just impact Mexicans, but also Native Americans too. Even today, one thing about the Native Americans, they don't believe that people can own land. They don't believe in that. So the reason why they lost their land is because of treaties. They didn't understand what they were signing. But we know that this is a battle that they're still encountering today. So a lot of times people are always saying, oh, Black folks need to pull themselves by their bootstraps. Or my great grandfather was an immigrant. He was able to pull himself by his bootstraps. But you have to understand, if your grandfather was from Europe, he had the ability, as I say, to assimilate into camouflage, because there were a lot of Europeans who changed their names in order for them to be granted with more opportunities. And so this is something in which is why African Americans are not moving as much as they needed to. This is a picture of African American men who were politicians. When Blacks, during the Reconstruction era, they decided that they wanted an education. That was a time where historically Black colleges and universities erected. It's also the time where they sought political positions. One of the things, which is one of my favorite shows, Finding Your Roots, one of the things that he talked about was that Dr. Gates, he interviewed Chris Rock. Chris Rock said, if I would have known, Chris Rock found out that his grandfather was a politician. He said, if I would have known that my grandfather was a politician, I might have gone that route. And so a lot of times people just don't know their history and the struggles or the accomplishments that they had to overcome. But guess what? The Ku Klux Klan, they came about. They said, oh no, we cannot allow these Black folks to have this power. We have to put them in their place. And even, which I just learned most recently, because I'm learning just as well as you are, is that where Central Park currently stands, there used to be a small village called Seneca Village, where free slaves went there and established their own community. But because they wanted to put Central Park there, they displaced those African Americans that were residing there. So as we already know, Asians had to encounter struggles just as well. So the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1883, that was a time in which the Chinese came over to work on the railroads. And they were treated unfairly based on the way that they looked. That's not the only thing that we did toward Asian individuals. But we also know the Japanese internment camps. That was a time in which during World War II, because they didn't want to make sure that they were not communicating with anybody in Japan, they decided to put the Japanese in internment camps, which is our form of concentration camps. Now, and today, those individuals who endured that pain, of course, our concentration camps were not like the Holocaust. They received $20,000 for reparations. So, as we know, Asians are considered the model minority. And a couple of days ago, I was afforded the opportunity to work with some individuals from India, and they were just talking about how, as Indians, how there is some type of divide between Blacks and Indians, and it was a system in which our society, when it came to, especially when we talk about the beginning of this country, where the white poor and the white poor, the white indentured servants and the Black slaves, the elite planters had to come up with a system on how to divide and conquer. The same thing happened when you're talking about Asians. You're talking about individuals who were considered as the model minority. During 1965, this gave them the opportunity, the 1965, the Immigration Act of 1965, it granted Asians an opportunity to come to America. The quota system disappeared, but they wanted the brightest. So they wanted people proficient in STEM, science, technology, and also medical doctors. So we already know this is not a sin. The sin of slavery is not something that is just applicable to America. We know Aborigines in Australia. We know that how those individuals, where you're talking about millions of Aborigines living there, to less than 100,000 left. To Trevor Noah, which is the comedian, he's biracial. His father is white. His father was not able to raise him because of apartheid in South Africa. So when I say this, and as I said, this topic is always very sensitive, but it's a topic that we have to address. White women tears. And so when we think about Blacks progressing, some of the reasons why they're not progressing is because of things that happened. So the first picture that we have in the upper left, that is what happened in Rosewood, Florida. A Black man was accused for raping a white woman, and the whites living down there decided to destroy the town. Same thing that happened in Tulsa. There was a Black man accused for assaulting a white woman, and what happened was they put him in jail, and a white mob wanted them to release him, and the black individuals who live in Tulsa said, no, we're not going to release him to you. And so what happened, they ended up having a massacre. That was Black Wall Street, where 26 Blacks lost their lives and 10 whites. And so the other one, the one that we know that is most popular when we talk about white women tears, we're talking about Emmett Till. How a 14-year-old Northerner was accused for saying something inappropriate to a white woman. And one of the classics that we all enjoy, To Kill a Mockingbird. And we know that this book, To Kill a Mockingbird, is always a classic and will stay a classic. And so when we think about that, how this Black man was accused for sexually assaulting a white woman, and you saw what happened to him. But then now, we thought this problem disappeared. No, it didn't. Now we have what people call Karens. We saw what happened to Amy Cooper. We know that Amy Cooper accused a man. She called the police saying that a Black man was trying to attack her, when that was not the case. So it's lucky that we live in the digital age where we're able to document a lot of these things. So as white women, when I say this, you represent the majority, which means you hold the power. So we know one of the reasons why that Hillary Clinton wasn't elected president is because there are people say, I'd rather vote for Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton because he's a man and she's a woman. And so you have to use your power as white women to make change. And so we can see that, yes, when it comes to white men, all of us are suffering, okay? All of us are suffering. And actually, Asian women make more money than white women and Black women and Hispanic women. But we know that we are so much powerful when we work together as a team. So, criminal justice system. When we think about the criminal justice system, we're thinking about who is incarcerated and what and why. So we know that there's a big issue with police officers today, a big issue with police officers. But you have to think about when they started. The whole purpose of the police officers started because of slave patrols. Their jobs were to ensure, again, their jobs were to ensure that the slaves did not run away. And so look at the stats. Now, I don't know why that this stats doesn't include Hispanic population, but you can see on how this hurts certain communities. So when we think about, children living in fatherless households, how does that impact on how children are going to be successful? Healthcare. Woo. So when we think about healthcare, guys, we got to think about why Blacks do not get the same treatment as whites. So the king of gynecology was Dr. Sims. And so when we think about, figuring out the anatomy of a woman's reproductive system, he experimented on Black slaves. Just imagine enduring that pain without anesthesia. And you know why they did it? Because they feel as if Blacks during that time, they had smaller brains, they had their weak lungs, and they had thick skin, and they felt that they were able to endure more pain. Secondly, when we're talking about the infant mortality rate, okay? So it does something about Black women. It doesn't matter their socioeconomic status and educational level, they still endure stress while being pregnant. And it's just the stress of being Black in America. Redlining. So you wonder why certain cities look the way that they do. It's a process of redlining. So redlining was something that was during the Great Depression, when they were giving out loans after the Great Depression to try to rebuild the economy. So what they did is they graded them. They graded the areas. So any area where anyone who was Black, who was Jewish, those areas were rated red. And they were considered not desirable. The ones that were considered green and blue were considered as being desirable. And redlining, if some of you look at your cities now, especially you live in the United States, you can see how you can see how some areas have not changed based on redlining. Same thing when we think about the GI Bill. I know my grandfather, both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. Although they fought during this war, they still were not granted the same opportunities. And so when we think about that, they didn't have the same housing. They weren't able to have access to loans. They were not able to get assistance for an education. I mean, all the things that were granted to them were given to the white soldiers, but not to the Black soldiers, simply because of their race. So think about today, COVID. We all know that COVID is having a major impact on why things are the way they are. We know institutional and systemic racism is contributing to that. And so we know that majority of the essential workers are African American and Latinx individuals. And we know that those individuals are not working in positions where they are afforded the opportunity where they're able to just work at home. And so that plays a major part on why things are the way they are. They also, you know, as African Americans, because food scarcity, nice grocery stores are not readily accessible. That also contributes to why Blacks have diabetes, high blood pressure. Those are the reasons why that they have those things, because the lack of quality food. So James Baldwin, he's been a hot topic for the last couple of years due to, you know, the current state of our country. It is certain in any case that ignorance allied with power is the most ferocious enemy justice can have. And so I want you to I give you an opportunity. I know some of you have been conversing with each other already. So as an individual, you have multiple dimensions. So when you think about your dimensions, I want you to think about which of these dimensions are important to you. So for example, is it your age? Is it your race? Is your ethnicity? Is it your gender? Is it your ability? So for example, when I think what's important to me as a Black woman, those are the two identifiers, as I said, are important to me. I want you to look at this, you know, look at the primary and the secondary dimensions to tell me which of these two dimensions are important to you. Write it down in the chat. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Great. Some of you are saying gender and sexual orientation. Some of you are saying gender and education. It was interesting. Some of you have not said anything about race. It's just interesting. Like I said, you have to figure out what's important to you. Right. So privilege. When we think about privilege, you know, there are certain privileges that you have, and those are things that are unearned. And so Peggy McIntosh is known for her work on white privilege. And so when she talks about privilege exists when one group has something of value that is denied to others simply because of the groups they belong to. And so when we think about that, we have to think about how does privilege tie in with white privilege. And so what she calls it, the invisible package of unearned assets, something that you automatically get, but you're oblivious to. You're unaware of it. You're unconscious about it. You're conscious about it because you know it is automatically earned and you automatically have it. So once you have privilege and you also have power, that causes oppression. So if you look at this chart, you can see the characteristics of people who are in the dominant culture. And then you see on the bottom, the characteristics of the individual who are not in the dominant culture. They're young, they're able-bodied, they're heterosexual, they have European heritage, they're white, they're male, they have upper class. Their color is light and pale. They are not Jewish. These are all the characteristics of individuals who hold most of the power. So when we think about this, we have to think about intersectionality. So we got two individuals. We have Caitlyn Jenner and we have Laverne Cox. So we know Caitlyn Jenner was formerly Bruce Jenner. So Caitlyn has been afforded to have certain privileges because Caitlyn Jenner was once a white man who also had money. Laverne Cox, she's a transgender woman, Black transgender woman. So when we talk about intersectionality, that means the issues that you encounter is not just about race, it's also about social class too. And it's also about your sex. So when you think about that, just think about the struggles. If she was not a Hollywood actress, just think about the struggles she would have encountered in the regular world. But because she is an actress, she's afforded certain opportunities than other individuals who classify themselves as transgender. So some of individuals on here are educators, right? We got some individuals on here are educators. And we know that once you see these negative messaging, how does that have an impact on the children that you interact on a daily basis? Or how does this have an impact on the people that you work with? So when you see these negative messages, you end up having a lower self-esteem. You end up thinking that you're less in. You end up saying that, I'm not good enough for this. Or you have to change who you are through the process of simulation, where you might say, you might act white, or you might say, you know what, I'm not going to act white, I'm going to act like my true self. It's just the ongoing battles that individuals who are people of color have to endure because they are not in power. So one of the most popular books, The Hate U Give. When we know Star was struggling from, she was code switching. You know, she acted a different way at school versus how she acted in the neighborhood. And there's some of us who are constantly dealing with this battle on a daily basis. Perception. This is an experiment done a long time ago. What do we consider as being the best looking doll or the preferable doll? And the young man just pointed at the white doll. So, you know, we have people from diverse backgrounds on this call. And so what we have to first figure out, one thing is, we have to understand that racism does exist. And a lot of times, if you say that I don't want to talk about it, you have to talk about it because we're not going to be able to move forward as a people. You got to get used to being uncomfortable. And that's the only way that we're going to be able to make progress. We don't need any white saviors. So when we think of movies such as The Help, Freedom Writers, The Blind Side, we don't need any white saviors. We need people like John Brown. Maybe not John Brown because it's a little bit militant, but we need people who have the courage to speak up when they see injustice. So there are 3 types of allies. There are people, the first one is called self-interest. That means I'm only going to look out for people that I care about. The next one is altruism, where I'm going to look out for those individuals over there. Social justice is a combination of I'm going to look out for people I care about, and I'm also going to do it for myself. So it's a combination. I'm doing it for them and us. It's a combine of both. So allyship, as we know, even through this, I think a lot of times with all the stuff that's been going on the last couple of weeks, we all try to figure out how can I get involved in this discussion surrounding around race. And so one of the things is that allyship, just understanding that this concept of allyship is lifelong. It's a lifelong process, meaning that you are going to, the first thing that you're doing right now is the first step of being an ally. You're willing to learn. You're willing to engage strategies on how you can be able to advocate for people who have been historically marginalized. Being cultural humble too, meaning that knowing that you're going to be learning something new all the time, and that learning is lifelong, and you're also going to learn that you are figuring out ways of how you can be a better person to be able to interact with people that are different than you. So the first thing you have to do is find out what the problem is. And when we talk about what is the problem, we're talking about what problem do you see going on in your organization. Next, you need to evaluate your organization. You need to find out the demographics of your organization. You need to look at race, ethnicity, nationality, educational attainment, disability, sexual orientation, employment status, religion, employment, part-time or full-time, immigrator status, and language. You need to be able to figure out who is actually working for your organization. First thing, you need to think about existing sources. What is your organization currently doing? If they have a commitment, a diversity inclusion commitment paper, do they have marketing materials? Do they have a statement about sexual harassment? What is your organization currently doing on that issue that you're passionate about? Then you have to collect and evaluate data. You can do a climate assessment. You can use surveys, focus groups, interviews, observations. And the data that you can use can be job satisfaction, client satisfaction, how many minority applicants, how many people how many people were moved from one position to the next, grievances, analyze pay across pay and function, and also find out why people are leaving your organization. That's key just as well. Business case. Everything is driven by money. So your organization needs to know why. Again, why do you want to do this work? We know all these corporations have been sending us emails for the last week about their commitment to Black lives. But why is your organization currently doing this work? What is going to be the return on investment? Vision. What is your vision? What do you want it to look like? What are your dreams for your organization if they focus on developing a mentoring program for African Americans, or they're developing a program for LGBTQI? You know, what is it going to look like? Next is a SMART goal. And so when we think about SMART goals, this is where it has to be specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And so when we think about that, we have to take in consideration the who, the what, and the how you're going to do it. Which measure indicator are you going to use to see if you're successful or not? You're also going to figure out by what time are you going to do it. So for example, by July 2021, we will have 5 individuals participating in the mentoring program. You have to be specific on how you want to go about doing that. Relevancy. Relevancy has to do with, does this SMART goal, is it applicable to our broader goals? Is it applicable to our goals and our company's goals and objectives? Resources. Think about everything that you need in order to achieve that goal. The money, the time, the facilities, the equipment, the partnerships, the people, the human capital, anything that you need in order to reach that goal. Next, you got to think about how you're going to get there. You're going to think about which steps you need to take in order to reach your goal. Every step must have someone that's responsible. You need to have a start date, an end date. You also have to list what type of resources you need in order to complete this action. You also have to decide what are your desired outcomes. If you do this, this is going to happen. And make sure that you, every action that you do, to see that you can monitor to find out if it's successful or not. So that is what you can do as an organization. You will get a form with all those with the parts you need for your action plan. You also need to think about what do you want to do on your own. So what are some things, I know we're getting close in time, we only have like 5 minutes left, but what are some things that you guys are interested in doing? What are the things that you guys, what type of programs are you thinking that you're focusing on concerning allies? What are some things that you guys are interested in doing? So some of you said Black Lives Matter. So that's something that you guys want to focus on. Think about things that you are interested in doing. Whatever you do, if you do it as an organization or if you do it on your own, you need to make sure, if you're doing it on your own, you definitely need to have an accountability partner, someone who's going to ensure that you're going to do what you promised you were going to do. So when you, at the end of this call, at the end of this webinar, you're going to receive a commitment form. You're going to also receive an action form. And then you're going to also receive a form on different strategies that you can become an ally. So does anyone have anything else on how you can become allies? Some people are saying that support Black entrepreneurs. Some of them are saying offer mentoring opportunities to minority individuals. So think about something that you're passionate about. You will get the form to help you figure out how you want to develop an action plan at the end of this call. So think about organizations. If you want to do things on your own, or if you want to do it for your organization, which organizations are focusing on this work? So we know the National Urban League is, Innocent Project, the Equal Justice Initiative, ACLU. Those are some organizations that you can work with. Online learning. You know, most of us have been in the house for the last 3 months. So edX, Coursera, and Class Central, you can either pay for the class or you can audit classes. In the last couple of months, I've just been reading a lot of information on American history. The Constitution Center and Yale University and the Gilderman Lehrman Institute are offering free classes around about government and American history. And I will send those links to you later. Books, these are only 2 books. There's a list of books I'm going to generate and pass over to you. And if you have any books, please put them in the chat. The Color of Law talks about the redlining, right? White fragility, well, I can't talk today. White fragility, I can't talk today. Fragility, that's another book that you can focus on reading. And there are other books that I'll send off in my email. Films, watch films about it. The Reconstruction on PBS. PBS have a lot of films. When They See Us and 13th is a good film. Any other films that you want to think of. I don't want to just focus on African Americans. So if you think about Asians, Native Americans, Hispanics, please include that information in your chat. So I said a lot because I wanted to give you some background information about the history, why things are the way they are. Believe me, I had more to share. And so with that in mind, I wanted to make sure that if some of you want to do a PSA of your commitment, please do that. Do a public service announcement stating on what you are going to do to help to ensure that everyone has a voice. or everyone is counted, that everyone's voices are being heard in society. And you can use the hashtag #AllyReady. All right, let me see if there are any questions that any of you have. I know we're short on time. All right. So I know I said a lot. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask? Let me look and see if I had anything else. Yes, I did record it. I said a lot, and so yes. Right, anything, put down anything that you have, and what I'll do is I'll generate a list. Oh, I'm going to send you some information on how, on a Facebook group, because I really would like for us to start thinking about how can we start working together as a team. We have people from other countries, which will be great, because it'll be interesting for us to find out what other countries are doing concerning issues concerning issues about race. So it'll be good for us to do that. So I'll send you the link for the Facebook group. All right, so I see somebody pulling up some resources. You can continue to do that. Are there any questions that anyone wants to ask? I know I said a lot, but hopefully you have homework. You have homework. It will be recorded. The slides won't be available, but you will have, I will send the recording to you. Perfect. If anyone else have anything else to say, please continue. You're welcome. Oh, I love it. I love it. He said, how can you advocate as a white man? That's perfect. So we need to figure out how we can go about doing that. It's about using, one thing we have to do is think about your privilege and how can you use your privilege to advocate for people who have been historically marginalized. So that would be something for us all to work together to try to figure out to solve. So you'll get handouts at the end. You'll get a link to the Facebook page, and I'll send you the recording. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. Oh, I'm going to send you guys, if you haven't done it, please fill out the evaluation, and I'll send it to everybody too. Perfect. But a lot of times, Terry, people don't know their history. Yes, yes, please share materials. Yes, I want this. My goal is to figure out what we can do to change this country or change this world, because we have people on here from Spain. So yes, definitely share all the resources. I'll be on for the next 10 minutes or so. If you want to continue to open up the dialogue or put resources, I'll put the resources, pull out the resources in our chat and put it in our group. Wow, see, we don't know anything about, that's good. I'm glad to hear people from Spain on here. You're welcome. You're welcome. Yes. No, and take racial justice to your kids' school. Oh, definitely so. The kids are, oh, believe me, they're woke. They're woke, definitely so. You're looking forward to figuring out how you can get to know people in other communities. That's what the problem is. We all gravitate toward people that look like us. We need to figure out how do we start working with people who are different than us. Definitely so. You live in United Kingdom. Wow. Yes. So I'm definitely. You're in Japan. Wow. We have a lot of people. It's great to see all these people here. Yes. And there is some Roberta, there is some curriculum from Zen Project, Teaching Tolerance, because I'm a former teacher. They have some good stuff on racial justice. There's going to be some other things, I'm sure. ASCD has some resources that they have too. So I'll share that with you just as well. Okay. Okay, I will. Perfect. I'll turn off all your mics. Hold on. Let's see here. Hold on for 1 second. Who wants to unmute? Everyone does or no? There were some people said that they wanted to unmute. Wow. Let me see. Let me see. I'm trying to get familiar with this myself. Hold on for 1 second. Let me see. You can unmute yourself if you would like, for those people who would like to discuss. There were some people who wanted to say something. Perfect. If you want to stay back and say anything or have conversations, I've unmuted you. I know some people said that they wanted to have conversations. If not, we can continue it on Facebook, in our Facebook group if you would like. Anybody want to say anything? You could put something on there. I've unmuted all of you.
Are we allowed to talk?
Anybody?
I've seen a couple of people saying the same thing that I've wondered, you know, how can we do this? I mean, this is how I live my life and how I've always.
Anybody, does anyone want to say anything? Okay.
How do you address performative allyship?
Anybody want to say anything?
Can you hear us?
So I've unmuted any of you who are interested. Anyone want to say anything? I can unmute. I think I've unmuted you all. I did.
You have people talking, but you're.
Let me see.
Ruth,
are you saying something?
Jesus. Yeah, you can't hear us. There are several people who are talking. And
Ruth, are you saying anything?
Asking.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, she can't.
Some people are speaking.
She can't hear us.
Why can I? Okay.
I'm gonna
I can't hear. Let me
chat
see.
with her.
Let me see. Hold on. Let me see. Let me see here.
I definitely agree with what some people were saying, that I want my efforts to be sincere. I don't want to come across to look, someone said, you know, collecting. I don't want it to be tokenism.
You can hear Ruth. Okay. Hold up for 1 second. Learning how to use all this technology.
Andrew, I sent you my email address so you can reach out to me. Janice is going to reach out to me. And I'll put my email address in the chat for everyone. Anyone who wants to reach out to me. I am African American and I live in Okinawa, Japan.
Thank you.
I work for the Department of Defense, high school teacher.
Ruth,
so I would love to
write down your thoughts. I don't know why this is not working on my end. We can continue this discussion during we can have our Facebook group, because I don't know with this technology, you know how sometimes this technology can be. Perfect.
Well, I guess we can all hear each other, but
guys, if you want to also share your emails with each other, that's fine too. And I'll send an email to anybody who would like to have a conversation. Okay. Seems like some of us are still on
Charesha, your talk was brilliant, and
some of you are teachers.
And it was really
perfect. I appreciate it.
Can you hear us?
Great. Good.
Okay. Goodbye, folks.
All right. Keep going. Yeah.
Sharisha? Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Can we carry on the discussion about how to be an ally?
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. My questions were mainly around the how do I do it while seeming sincere and not like I'm trying to, you know, quote unquote, collect people that aren't white.
I think,
Yeah, I mean,
Andrew, that's a great question. And as a Black woman, I would say just for someone who just starts a genuine conversation with me, that's the best. That's when I feel that, you know, someone is being sincere. You know, just asking me how my day was or is, or how things are going, just a genuine conversation.
I have no problem talking to people, so thank you, Ruth.
And I also put my email address in the chat. I am a part of a Facebook group called the Association of White Anti-Racist Educators. And I'd be happy to have you all in the group, in the Facebook group. And there's a plethora of information there and great conversations going on there as well.
Thank you so much, Ruth.
You're welcome. All right, so Lise, Victoria, if you send me your email address, I can send the link out for the Facebook group, and then you can try and you can just add yourself to the group. But I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so.
do you think there'll be a discussion? I was really motivated by the talk, and I think all the questions that people wrote went so fast for me. But I was hoping to be able to discuss how, you know, I'm white, how I can help. But in my city, I've been attending what's called a Windrush Generation and Descendants meeting. So these are people that came to the UK in the 1950s after the Second World War, because Britain invited those people to come and rebuild the country. And they've been in the UK since then. And many of them don't have their own, didn't apply to have British passports. So it's really kind of very, very supportive, I think, for people who aren't Caribbean or from that Windrush generation to attend those meetings and just hear people's stories. So I don't know if anybody here in this group, in listening to Charisha's really inspiring talk, if any of you already belong to kind of community groups or local groups in your neighborhoods where you can actually connect with people and hear their personal stories, because I think that's like the only way that you can really begin to have empathy. So today I'm also part of a group that supports refugees and asylum seekers in my city, and we have lots of kind of British born English people that run the organisation to support the refugees and asylum seekers. But today, the Equality and Diversity Officer, who's Brazilian, kind of encouraged those refugees and asylum seekers to speak. And when you listen and I think talk and give those people a chance to tell their stories, it gives you a different perspective. So I think it's more than just one-to-one, but speaking in a group. So I was hoping that we could do a little bit of that tonight, if possible.
Those groups in your area sound great. I wish I had something like that in my area where I live. But one thing that I am doing actually this weekend is I am starting a virtual tea, and it's a virtual tea with some friends that I have around the world, actually, to just sit and have a conversation. You're in the comfort of your own home, but you're having tea in your own home, and we're just having a genuine conversation about race. I think Sharice gave us a lot of historical background information, but I was looking for, how do we move forward? What do we do now? We know that this is the history, this has been the problem. How do I truly become an ally? And so I think, Andrew, that's why you walked away with that question. Okay, so what do I do? How do I get friends? How can I be supportive? I want to be supportive. And I think those things were left unsaid. And that's the conversation that we need to have. Oh, Jake, I'm looking at your question or your statement in the chat. I too have an 11-year-old son. Well, he'll be 11 in August. Yeah, you know, I'm not sure if at 11 years old he would understand the history, but start there. There is history about that, and there was a white doctor who, when he started dividing people based on race, he used the athleticism and things like that, the builds of the Black man, to separate. And that's why that ideology is still going on today, that people think that Black people are more athletic, or they can sing and dance and do all these other things as opposed to other people in the world. So that's a historical thing. And I think that's a construct, just like race is a construct. But that's just my personal opinion.
Thank you. Yeah, I didn't quite know what to tell him, but I tried to tell him about these things being a construct. And I don't know, you never know what an 11-year-old is going to absorb and what gets through to him, but
Right.
Thank you.
But I think if you continue to have those conversations, because, you know, as educators, you know, that children or people in general, they may not get it the first time, but they'll get it the third or fourth or fifth time. So keep having those conversations. That's what's important.
One of the things that I struggle with is I, want to be open and vocal about my allyship, but I also don't want to be that guy that seems like he's posting, Black Lives Matters photos just so he gets, social capital. Is there a way to, post and be supportive without seeming like you're doing it to bolster your own standing?
Why not set up like a Zoom talk like this to have discussions?
But I think Andrew is talking about just on his social media, how does he not come off as that guy that's just trying to be a show off, you're saying?
Yeah. My current answer or like thought process is, if I post something and like try to make it actionable, like here are some worthy groups, here are some groups worth donating to, or like here's a picture of a rally, it was amazing, I encourage you to go out too, to make it something that's more about moving the cause forward, rather than just being like, here's my Black photo.
I think, Andrew, doing just what you said, and don't use the word I. You didn't in this conversation just now. I'm just saying in general.
Okay.
Just don't use the word I. I went to this rally and I helped save the Black people, or I helped save these people. Stay away from that I, and just be genuine in your thoughts and in your words, and say, this organization is seeking help, is seeking allies. Please support. If you say it in that way, then your authenticity, your true self, your being genuine will come through. And I think that's what people will see.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Sorry to put you on the spot with all this.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad that we can have this type of conversation, and this is what I was looking to have actually, is to have an authentic conversation with people.
Mm-hmm.
The virtual tea sounds like a great idea.
Is that because you can hear an English accent, Ruth?
But don't want to come off as the naive either.
Is this virtual tea like a thing we can organize via Facebook, or is that because I like that idea?
Yeah, so like bring your favorite teacups and sauces. And that's brilliant. And then just talk about race, or talk about, you know, misconceptions that we have, or anything. Yeah.
So what I did is, after this incident happened with George Floyd, I started just watching my Facebook page of my white friends. And I just started looking at what they posted. And if they posted something that was in support of Black lives, just people in general, just trying to move forward and weren't being antagonistic and, well, he was on drugs or he used a fake $20 bill and that kind of thing, and just were sincere in their thoughts about this man was killed, was murdered. Those are the people that I reached out to on my Facebook page and in my friend group from work, and said, hey, I just want to have tea. Let's just talk.
So do you feel that people have really kind of shown, excuse the pun, but shown their true colors since then, like friends that you thought, you know, were allies since this has happened?
Caroline, can you say your question again? You broke up a little bit, or Jen or whomever was talking. Can everyone?
I guess what I was trying to ask was, I have some friends definitely from like Facebook that I would love to get together and do this kind of thing. I don't know how to explain it. I don't want to come off as like, let's talk about it now because it's a hot topic. Like, how can we talk about it to actually, like you said, move it forward? What can we do, you know, in the future? You know, I'm a teacher, so obviously I have a lot of teacher friends. And so this is something that we do constantly talk about as well.
Well, I started the conversation by going in their inbox and saying, hey, this is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and this was laid on my heart, and I just wanted to openly ask you if you would be willing to sit down and have tea with me so that we can have a conversation. I want to be supportive of what's going on in the world, supportive of other people who don't look like me, because I think it's about time for this to stop. And I think people will be open to that.
Is there?
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. Go.
Sorry, my mic isn't working.
Oh, okay. Someone said, okay. Jen was asking if you felt that your friends showed their true colors on Facebook. Yes. Yes, I do. In fact, in all transparency here for me, I've been silent a lot, and especially at work. Many things that I'm feeling is I leave unsaid. I don't say because I don't want to come off as the angry Black woman. And that's the thing. If I'm passionate about something, then it said, oh, she's angry, or she's emotional, or she's mean, or just whatever. And so I think that when they started showing their true colors, it surprised me because I'd never had a conversation with them to know how they truly felt. So I was then in shock, like, wow, oh my gosh, they really are supportive. And if I'd have just had that conversation in the teacher's lounge, I would have known that a long time ago, but I was just too afraid to do that. And they may have been afraid to talk to me as well, because people are afraid to talk about race, especially at work.
Sorry, can I ask another question? I don't want to dominate the conversation.
Sure.
Is there goodwill? Because I want to speak up and be supportive and say things, but I always feel like I'm gonna like say something wrong and sort of like not ostracized, but like I'll be, you know, seen in bad light, and I obviously like, you know, I want to be supportive and do so in the right way. If I screw up, like is there goodwill that's like, it's a good thing you're pretty. Like, we appreciate your trying. We'll get there.
Andrew, I think you just need to stop being afraid and just be open with the person that you're talking to and say, hey, I'm learning. I'm going to make some mistakes here. And I want you to help me because I want to be supportive of you.
Okay.
And I think that goes a long way. It truly does.
Okay.
It really does.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ruth, in relation to what you said, a friend of mine who's she's Brazilian and she's an ethnic minority, and she's the equality and diversity officer at the university where I grew up. And she told me about institutional racism, and it was the first time I learned about this concept this week, in fact. And she told me that she was perfectly well qualified for the job. She was probably the most qualified for the job, but she felt that she was discriminated against because of her color. And she told me that she was discriminated against. She felt that she was discriminated against by one particular guy in the office who treated her differently because of her skin color. And I asked her, but you know, what makes you say it was your skin color? And she said, that's what everybody told me in the office. Oh, it could have been a personality, whatever they say. But I think because of these conversations that we're having about Black Lives Matter, it's really bringing to surface more and more that racism exists, and my friends that have dark skin or aren't white have told me that it's actually difficult and to talk about it for fear of being like you mentioned, you know, angry, but it might not be perceived as angry, but it might, so I think there needs to be a safe space where people feel that they can talk about it without being, you know, blamed. I wish my friend Asha was here in the discussion, because she can explain it better than I can, because she looks Indian, and so she just experienced it.
What's going on here?
Yeah, so and I agree with you. I think that once we start having these conversations, then that would help move us along. Regarding the capitalism and racism, have a deep intertwined history. Does the end of racism mean the end of capitalism? And my personal opinion is that I don't think so. I think that there's a space for everyone to be successful.
No. When did y'all?
I think that Sharice doesn't know she's on the mic. And to make money. So I don't.
The nurse said that? That's your sister?
Capitalism. I think, and then someone else mentioned up above about how to be supportive of your friends and family who are.
I'm tired of this stuff.
But also be.
You talked to Betty?
The Black Lives Matter movement. And in my opinion, I just want to be clear that the Black Lives Matter movement doesn't mean.
No, girl, what are you talking about? That's not it. I was just asking you how I did. Don't worry about it.
Goodness.
Yeah, I had over 100 participants.
Maybe I wonder if
I'm looking. They still on here now, going back and forth with each other. Huh? I don't know yet. I gotta look.
I don't know if we can mute her.
But all right, okay. No, you don't zoom in. No, no, it's over with. Right now, I'm trying to, yeah, all right, bye-bye.
All right, so.
Let me see. All
right, was that helpful? I'm sorry, we got a little bit distracted with the other conversation going on.
Can we go around and share some ways that we're each individually trying to keep this going to make sure that it doesn't fade with the protests? Just so I can get some ideas. I'm happy to start.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Ruth, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I donate.
Let's see.
I donate to different charities monthly. I volunteer with the college access program, and I would like to start doing like a order in one night.
You guys hear me?
Order in every night from a order in.
I know some of you are still on.
Restaurant. So I'm curious what.
All right, I need to figure out how to get you. I can hear your voice. That's what I'm trying to figure out. This is why I was having technical problems before. It won't let me. Let me look one more time.
What I'm going to do is everyone who posted their email address here, I'm going to send out an email.
I had unmute. Did you try to select to see if you can get on?
I'm going to send an email out to everyone who gave me their email address.
Let me see here.
And we can have our own Zoom conversation. How about that?
I'm going to make you host and see if that'll make a difference.
That sounds like a fantastic idea.
Okay.
Can you see anything?
Love that.
Can you
idea.
talk?
Thanks.
Yes, I can see. Can you hear me? Yeah, so she just made me a host. I don't know Sharice. I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I was just on her call.
Instant friends.
But I am copying and pasting your email addresses. And I do have to do a bit of work, but once I finish that, I will send an email out to everyone and we can have our own Zoom conversation and shoot, have our own tea. So I'll do that. How about that?
Sounds like a plan. Thank you so much, Ruth.
All right, you're welcome.
Yes, I definitely like the idea of open conversation. Sounds great.
All right, there's one more person that just jumped on. Let me get her email address before Sharice ends this chat or ends this group. Okay, and let me save it. So what I've been doing is copying and pasting your email addresses and then putting it in a.
Can you hear me now?
Putting it somewhere where I can.
What's going on? Why does that keep acting up? This is a new computer. I shouldn't have any problems. Let's see here.
So I guess Teresa does what we all do, is talk to ourselves.
Hold up for 1 second.
Okay, Rochelle, I do have your email
Only
address.
thing about it, if I have to go on and come back off, because I don't know why it won't let me, let me see. Let me see if I start video. I don't want to do that.
But everyone, I'm going to have to jump off to do some work, but I will certainly email you. And let me put my email address in the chat again.
This is getting frustrating, guys. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with this. Why can't I have problems with?
I want you to reach out to me, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
All right, I put 2 email addresses there. So I'll definitely email you. And, you know, if something happens and I have the email address wrong or something like that, please reach out to me. But I have to jump off now because I have to work. But I appreciate you all, and I hope I've been a bit helpful, but I loved hearing from you as well. All right, thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Have fun doing those lesson plans.
Thank you.
I wonder. I know I'm still struggling. Why is this going on? Now you know what? I'm gonna keep on working. If you guys can keep on talking, I'm gonna try to figure out how. I know we're losing some people, but I'm not sure why. If any of you want to talk offline, we can. So if we want to have a conversation, we could talk offline, or we can try to have a Facebook group and do it too. Because I don't know what's going on with this, why it's not working where I can't hear you guys. Because I don't know. So